Technologically and socially, Planetos is similar to medieval Earth. Maesters control the distribution of knowledge in the Seven Kingdoms as they have done since Paramore Hightower, the man that created the Citadel as a place of knowledge in Old Town. Dorian Hightower's grandson, Daemon, took an Andal princess as a bride, and she bore him a son. Very soon he died of a bad belly, leaving a septon named Robeson to be regent for his infant son Tristan, and solidifying the faith's hold on education. Thousands of years later, when the Targaryens relocated to Dragonstone from Valyria, the culture of the faith was long since soaked into the social structures of the Seven Kingdoms, including its strict patriarchy and casual misogyny. Aegon Targaryen was born the middle child between older sister Visenya and younger sister Rhaenys. It is Valyrian tradition to marry within the family, which also appears to be the inclination. Polygamy is allowed, but not required. In this time, children have two biological parents, a mother and a father. Both parents donate DNA material to create a child. Observers at court could not fail to note that the king spent 10 nights with Rhaenys for every night with Visenya. If this is not hyperbole, this means that Aegon had relations with Rhaenys 10 nights for every night he had relations with Visenya, and yet he had only one child with each. It could mean that he had sex with Rhaenys a total of 10 times and Visenya once, which would make sense for a fertile man having only 2 children. But that is not the implication from the text or in his choice to marry Rhaenys. It has been theorized that Aegon the Conqueror was infertile, and his 2 children were not of his body. If Valyria and Royne followed similar inheritance rules of absolute primogeniture, Visenya, as the eldest child, would be the heir to Aegon and Valyna. The story of the dances Rhaenys as the queen that never was indicates that probability. As the winners write the histories, one issue that comes with a patriarchy is the expediency of misrepresenting women's contributions to history. It would make sense if Visenya was the heir to Dragonstone to choose to marry Aegon, her brother, to keep up the dynasty. The rules of Westeros would call this marrying for duty. Aegon and Rhaenys having a physical attraction to each other could lead Aegon taking Rhaenys as a second wife. If Aegon was the true head of his family, he would not have to marry Visenya for any reason, and she would be free to marry someone else or no one. It appears that there was a genetic bottleneck at this time. How many Targaryen cousins were alive without dragons to ride? Did they all perish in the conquest? There is no data about their families or children except for a half-brother Orys. The Targaryens are a Valyrian family. Their culture is Valyrian. Their language was Valyrian. They had 3 dragons, 1 remaining from Valyria and 2 born on Dragonstone. 4 of the dragons that came with them from Valyria had perished. Rebuilding dragonkind must have been uppermost on their minds. Common theorizing and House of the Dragon scripts have implied that the 7 kingdoms needed to be united to fight the death coming from the north. How would this trio make this work? There were 3 siblings, and 3 Valyrian steel weapons attributed to them. Dark Sister belonged to Visenya, Blackfire to Aegon, and a dagger inscribed with a hidden prophecy. Rhaenys was artistic, not a fighter, but to be at the head of a ruling family and at war and in battle unarmed during wartime seems negligent. I believe the dagger belonged to Rhaenys. She would otherwise have had her own Valyrian steel sword. If the dagger did belong to Rhaenys, it could imply that the line of the prince or princess that was promised flows through Rhaenys to Aenys and not through Aegon. This would make Aenys more important for the actual reason they conquered Westeros in the first place, but less Valyrian if his blood is diluted. The 3 conquerors would have to rule over a united island that for thousands of years organized itself around a patriarchy. The first men were male preference, but the faith of the 7 were a Salic or male-only patriarchy in a militant way from the hierarchy and job segregation of their 7 gods on down. If there were no sons, but only daughters, you need to find male cousins from male fathers. Bastardy also was frowned upon, putting laws and estates ahead of blood. Visenya, eldest of the 3 siblings, was as much a warrior as Aegon himself, as comfortable in ringmail as in silk. She carried the Valyrian longsword Dark Sister and was skilled in its use, having trained beside her brother since childhood. The warrior Visenya was intrinsic to the conquest of Westeros. but there would be no way a woman would be permitted to rule the population. Also, she was of a different culture, nationality, and faith than Westeros. Knowing this, the Targaryen trio made quite a few cultural changes to make it easier for the local population to accept them as their overlords. I would say the first concession was to make Aegon the figurehead of the kingdom rather than Visenya, who already had Dragonstone. They crowned him in Old Town. They accepted maesters into their court. They chose a heraldic achievement, a dragon with 3 heads, which would signify meaning on multiple levels, including 3 coal rulers. There are reliable reports of Aegon and his sister Visenya visiting the citadel of Old Town in their youth, and hawking on the arbor as guests of Lord Redwine. He may have visited Lannisport as well. Accounts differ. Before the conquest, Visenya and Aegon toured Westeros together. The histories would read like Aegon made these trips, and oh, by the way, Visenya tagged along, rather than the inverse. Aegon didn't rule from Dragonstone. It may be one of the concessions if the island was truly Visenya's inheritance up until the conquest. It was the Valyrian holding with the volcano that housed the dragons. He built King's Landing as his Westerosi seat, with hills they named after the 3 of them. Whether Visenya ruled from behind the scenes or she truly stepped aside for her brother is not considered in the histories. It's a given that Aegon, the male, was the sole ruler. It is well documented that Aegon spent 6 months out of every year of his reign on progress, while his sisters remained behind ruling in his stead. And yet Aegon is still considered the first ruler of a united Westeros. Rhaenys and Visenya had a single child each, sons both. Rumor had it that Rhaenys would sleep with her musician poet friends, and that Aenys was not Aegon's. He wasn't born until 7 years after the conquest. When Rhaenys died in 10 AC and Aenys became sickly, Visenya's efforts led to the birth of Maegor in 12 AC. It may have been by increasing the natural efforts at conception, but some say it was by sorcery, because of course, if there are no children, the woman must be barren. Visenya would be in charge of the Valyrian heritage from her seat on Dragonstone, while supporting the family's prophetic heritage in Westeros. Rhaenys, with Aegon championing the prince that was promised lineage, heading in the Westerosi monarchy, and Visenya and Aegon, the Dragonstone sovereignty, as separate entities, until Aenys' childhood illness cast doubt on the survival of the kingdom, the Targaryen line, not to mention the prophecy. Visenya may not have had any more than a dynastic interest in making babies with Aegon or anyone else, until there was a possibility of ending Targaryen dragonkind. If you are not a Salic patrilineal culture, Rhaenys having a child with anyone would be enough to continue the line. Aegon was superfluous. Visenya having a child actually continues the primary Dragonstone line, as it is done in absolute primogeniture enacted by the Rhoynish and Dorne. The firstborn daughter having a child comes before the thirdborn daughter having a child, no matter which child is born first. There is a complication if any children are not Aegon's, but it's not dynastic but genetic. If they don't have 2 dragon riding genes, if their fathers aren't Targaryens, we don't know how it works. Since both Aenys and Maegor rode dragons, it became a non-issue, unless either sister was secretly involved with Orys Baratheon or another yet-to-be-named cousin. King Aenys compounded his misjudgment by granting the title Prince of Dragonstone to his presumptive heir, Prince Aegon. A hush fell over the hall at those words, for all present knew that title had hitherto belonged to Prince Maegor. At the high table, Queen Visenya rose and stalked from the hall without the king's leave. Visenya felt slighted when Aenys named his son Prince of Dragonstone. This was not only putting his son over hers, but stealing the sovereignty of Dragonstone from her, her birthright, and her reward for assisting in the conquest. Maegor is the true heir of the Targaryen line, through his mother, and conceivably his father if it was Aegon. He carried Blackfyre and rode Balerion before the death of Aenys. If Visenya had actually fathered him with Aegon, having trouble fathering children could have been passed on to Maegor. It was due to Maegor's violent nature and murderous tendencies, and most importantly, his disregard for Westerosi norms that would make most people look for any reason to delegitimize his claim on Westeros. If Rhaenys had survived Meraxes' death, and the dagger was returned to Aegon on Dragonstone by the Dornish princess, his despair at being set aside for a more peaceful life may be understandable. There may be a hidden genetic line to follow in the south. It is possible to have a purely matrilineal line to Dany, but there are too many holes in the genealogy on the female side to yet make that leap in logic. There are female Targaryens descended from Aenys marrying and procreating in many houses, and on both known continents. There are Valyrians in most of the Free Cities, and many in Lys and Volantis, some possibly from Dragon Lords. Dany's Targaryen blood seems quite diluted on the surface, and yet she hatched 3 and rides 1 dragon. The women marrying into the Targaryen line may have hidden Valyrian blood. Martells, Rogars, and Danes, for example, are main contenders. In conclusion, if Aegon never fathered any children, he has the legacy of the conquest, riding Balerion, King's Landing, and being the figurehead of a united Westeros, eventually. The next reign forward, Targaryens continued to have silver hair, purple eyes, and until the dance, dragons. Anything else is only an issue if, like within the laws and norms of the faith, only the male half of the child's blood matters.